The Cresthaven courtroom buzzed as Aisha Coleman stood shackled, the judge's gavel slamming down to dismiss trumped-up charges of evidence tampering. Freedom seemed hers until a DOJ agent stormed in, voice booming, declaring her their lead investigator into police corruption. Gasps erupted. Her arrest was a sting to trap the precinct. Everyone thought her nightmare ended there, but outside, sunlight glinted off a sniper's scope on a distant rooftop. Her war had just begun. What deadly secrets would she uncover next? Before we dive in, drop your city in the comments, and if justice fires you up, hit like and subscribe for more truth-packed stories. Aisha Coleman stepped out of the Cresthaven courthouse, her wrist still raw from the shackles that had bitten into her skin minutes ago. The late afternoon sun hung low, casting long shadows across the cracked stone steps, but the air thrummed with something darker than the fading light. She adjusted the collar of her navy blazer, her heartbeat steady despite the chaos she'd just endured. The judge's dismissal echoed in her mind, a fleeting taste of victory after weeks of fabricated charges and sleepless nights. She'd outsmarted them in there, her sharp mind slicing through the lies like a blade through cloth. But as her boots hit the pavement, a ripple of unease prickled her spine. The street wasn't empty. It was alive, pulsing with menace. A crowd had gathered, maybe 50 strong, spilling out from the courthouse lawn onto the sidewalk. They weren't the usual gawkers or reporters itching for a soundbite. These were men in faded jackets and scuffed boots, their faces flushed with liquor and fury. Off-duty cops, she realized, her stomach tightening. Their badges were tucked away, but the arrogance in their swagger screamed precinct loyalty. She scanned the pack, noting the clenched fists, the glint of brass knuckles on one thug's hand, the way they spread out to block her path. This wasn't random. This was planned. Her eyes flicked to a black cruiser parked across the street, its tinted windows reflecting the dying sun. A silhouette shifted inside. Lieutenant Victor Hargrove. She'd never met him, but she knew his name, his rank, his reputation. Commander of Cresthaven's dirtiest precinct, a man who wore his power like armor and his racism like a crown. He'd orchestrated her arrest, and now he was here to watch her bleed. Thought you'd walk away. Clean, huh? A voice snarled from the mob. It belonged to a stocky man with a buzz cut, his cheeks red and veiny from too many beers. He stepped forward, cracking his knuckles, his lips curling into a sneer. "You don't belong here, Coleman. Never did." The words hit her like a slap, but she kept her face stone cold, her posture unyielding. She'd heard worse in her 32 years, growing up black in a city that chewed up dreams and spat out bones. She'd clawed her way into the DOJ, spent a decade dismantling corruption with nothing but her wits and a relentless will. This wasn't her first fight, but the sheer venom in his tone, the way the others nodded and muttered agreement, told her this was different. This was personal. The crowd tightened around her, a noose of bodies closing in. "Go back where you came from," a wiry guy with a patchy beard shouted, hurling a half-empty beer bottle. It smashed at her feet, glass exploding across the asphalt, the sharp scent of hops cutting through the humid air. She sidestepped the shards, her pulse quickening but her expression locked tight. Another bottle flew, grazing her shoulder, and then a fist swung from her left. She ducked, years of DOJ, training kicking in, her body moving before her mind fully registered the threat. The punch missed, the attacker stumbling into his body, and she seized the gap. She bolted toward a narrow alley between the courthouse and a crumbling brick tenement, her boots pounding the pavement, her breath sharp in her throat. Shouts erupted. Behind her, a chorus of slurs and curses chasing her like a pack of wolves. "Get her," someone roared, and the thud of footsteps echoed off the walls as the mob gave chase. She darted into the alley, the shadows swallowing her, the air thick with the stench of garbage and damp concrete. Her eyes darted for an exit, spotting a rusted fire escape 10 yards ahead. She leaped, grabbing the lowest rung, her muscles straining. As she hauled herself up, the metal groaned under her weight, but it held. She climbed fast, her hands slick with sweat, her blazer catching on a jagged edge and tearing at the seam. Below, the first of the mob rounded the corner, their faces twisted with rage, their voices a guttural howl. "You can't run forever, you black bitch," one screamed, his words a dagger aimed at her soul. She reached the second landing, her chest heaving, and risked a glance down. They were scrambling over each other, too drunk or too clumsy to climb with her speed. She swung onto the roof, the gravel crunching beneath her boots, and crouched behind a crumbling chimney. Her lungs burned, but her mind raced faster. She'd escaped, outsmarted them. The mob milled below, shouting threats, but they couldn't reach her here. She'd won this round, she told herself, her lips twitching into a grim smile. Hargrove's lackeys had failed. She'd lived to fight another day. But as her breathing slowed, a distant rumble pulled her gaze back to the street. The black cruiser hadn't moved. Its engine growled to life now, headlights flaring like predators' eyes in the dusk. Hargrove leaned out the driver's window, his pale face a mask of calm fury, his grey eyes locking onto the rooftop where she hid. He didn't shout, didn't gesture. He just stared, his silence more chilling than the mob's noise. Then he raised a radio to his lips, his voice too low to hear, but the intent clear as crystal. The cruiser peeled away, tires screeching, vanishing. Into the maze of Cresthaven streets, Isha's gut twisted. This wasn't over. She'd slipped their grasp, but Hargrove wasn't the type to let a loss slide. She stayed low, watching the mob disperse, their anger fizzling into grumbles as they staggered back to their trucks. The alley fell quiet, the only sound the faint drip of water from a busted pipe. She waited, counting minutes, letting the adrenaline drain from her veins. When the coast seemed clear, she descended the fire escape, her movements deliberate, her senses sharp. She needed to get home, regroup, call her DOJ handler. She'd survived the courthouse, the mob. She could handle whatever came next. The walk to her apartment took 20 minutes, her path winding through Cresthaven's grimy underbelly. The city loomed around her, a sprawl of sagging row houses and shuttered factories, the air heavy with rust and despair. She kept her head down, her pace steady, blending into the evening foot traffic. Her place was a modest third-floor unit in a brick building off Sycamore Street, nothing fancy but hers. She climbed the stairs, her keys jangling in her hand, her mind already plotting her next move. The DOJ sting had worked, exposing the precinct's rot. Now she'd dig deeper, unearth Hargrove's secrets, bring him down for good. She unlocked the door and stepped inside, flicking on the light. The sight stopped her cold. Her living room was a wreckage, furniture overturned, cushions slashed, glass from a shattered lamp crunching under her boots. Papers from her desk littered the floor, her laptop smashed beyond repair. Her breath caught as she moved deeper, her bedroom in worse shape, the mattress gutted, clothes strewn like confetti. Then she heard it, a low chuckle from the kitchen. 3 uniformed cops emerged, their badges glinting, their smirks wide and cruel. "Aisha Coleman," the tallest one drawled, twirling a baggie of white powder in his gloved hand. "You're under arrest for possession with intent to distribute." Her heart slammed against her ribs. This wasn't hers. She didn't touch drugs, never had. But the baggie was real, the cuffs they snapped on her wrists colder than the courtrooms had been. "You planted that," she spat, her voice steady despite the fury boiling inside. The cop shrugged, his eyes glinting with malice. "Prove it, sweetheart." They dragged her out, her neighbors peeking through cracked blinds, their whispers a dull hum of judgment. She caught a glimpse of the street as they shoved her into a squad car. The black cruiser idled a block away, Hargrove's silhouette unmistakable. Behind the wheel, the precinct was a blur of fluorescent lights and stale coffee, the booking process a mockery of justice. They fingerprinted her, photographed her, tossed her into a holding cell with a rusted bench and a flickering bulb. She sat, her back straight, her mind racing. Hargrove had struck back, faster and harder than she'd expected. The mob was a distraction, this the real blow. Planting drugs, framing her again, turning her victory into ash. She clenched her fists, nails digging into her palms. She'd beat this too. The DOJ would see through it, pull her out. She just had to hold on. Hours crawled by, the cell's chill seeping into her bones. Then the door clanked open, and a familiar face appeared. Marcus Tate, her DOJ handler, a wiry man with salt and pepper hair and a no-nonsense stare. "You're out," he said, tossing her a jacket. "Warrant's fake. We've got proof it was forged under Hargrove's orders." Relief flooded her, sharp and sweet. She followed him out, the cops glaring as she passed, their plan unraveling. She'd won again. But as she stepped into the night, a news van screeched up, lights blinding her. A reporter shoved a mic in her face, shouting about exclusive footage of her drug-fueled rampage. Marcus frowned, pulling her aside as a TV screen in the van flickered to life. There she was, body cam video showing her swinging at cops, a baggie in her hand, her face twisted in rage. It was fake, every frame a lie, but it looked real. Too real. Her stomach dropped. Hargrove wasn't done. He'd turned the city against her, and this was just the beginning. Aisha Coleman slumped against the cold steel bench of the holding cell, her wrists aching from the cuffs that had just been pried off. Marcus Tate's words still rang in her ears. The warrant was fake, forged under Hargrove's slimy fingerprints. She was free again, the second time in 12 hours that she'd slipped through the precinct's grasp. The air in the station buzzed with static from a crackling radio, the faint hum of resentment seeping from the cops who'd booked her. She stood, brushing off her torn blazer, her dark eyes glinting with a fire that hadn't dimmed despite the exhaustion gnawing at her bones. She'd beaten them again. The DOJ had her back, and Hargrove's latest stunt had crumbled like wet paper. But as she followed Marcus out, the weight of that doctored body cam footage lingered in her gut like a stone. She'd seen the news van, the lies flickering on that screen. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The night air hit her like a slap. As they stepped outside, thick with the scent of exhaust and the distant rumble of Cresthaven's restless streets, Marcus handed her a burner phone, his voice low and clipped. "Get home, lay low. We'll handle the press tomorrow." She nodded, tucking the device into her pocket, her mind already spinning. Home. She needed a shower, a bed, a moment to breathe. The walk to her apartment felt longer this time, the city's pulse heavier, its shadows deeper. Every flickering streetlight seemed to watch her, every passing car a potential threat. She kept her pace brisk, her senses sharp, her boots scuffing the uneven sidewalk. Sycamore Street loomed ahead, her building's chipped brick facade a faint comfort in the gloom. She climbed the stairs, her keys cold in her hand, her heartbeat a steady drum against her ribs. She pushed the door open and froze. The wreckage from earlier hadn't been touched, her apartment still a battlefield of splintered wood and shredded fabric. But now, a new layer of chaos coated the ruin. Muddy boot prints tracked across the floor, fresh and wet, leading from the living room to the kitchen. Her pulse spiked, her hand instinctively reaching for the concealed knife in her boot, a habit from her undercover days. She edged forward, the silence deafening, her breath shallow. Then she saw them, 3 cops lounging against her counter, their uniforms crisp, their smirks sharper than the glass crunching under her feet. The tallest one, a lanky guy with a buzz cut and a scar slicing his eyebrow, held up a baggie of white powder, twirling it between his fingers like a prize. "Aisha Coleman," he drawled, his voice dripping with mock surprise. "Back so soon, you're under arrest, possession with intent, again." Her blood turned to ice, then boiled. "That's not mine," she snapped, her tone cutting through, the room like a whip. "You planted it, same as last time." The cop chuckled, stepping closer, his breath sour with cheap coffee. "Sure it's not. Tell it to the judge." The other 2 moved in, one a squat man with a bulldog face, the other a wiry kid who couldn't hide his nerves. They grabbed her arms, their grips bruising, and she twisted, testing their hold. She could fight, maybe take one down, but 3, not without a cost. The cuff snapped on, colder than before, biting into her raw skin. "You're wasting your time," she said, her voice steady despite the fury clawing her chest. "The DOJ's already onto you." The tall one grinned, his teeth yellowed and uneven. "We'll see about that, princess." They hauled her out, her boots dragging across the debris of her own life. The hallway blurred past, neighbors' doors staying shut, their fear a silent wall. Outside, a squad car waited, its lights flashing red and blue, painting the street in eerie pulses. She caught a glimpse of the black cruiser a block away, Hargrove's silhouette a dark stain behind the wheel. Her jaw tightened. He'd sent these clowns, doubled down after the mob failed. The ride to the precinct was a haze of smug laughter, and radio chatter, The cops tossing barbs like drug-running trash and Cresthaven don't need your kind. Each word was a nail, but she kept her face blank, her mind racing. This was a setup, bolder and sloppier than before. Hargrove was desperate, and that made him dangerous. The station swallowed her again, its fluorescent glare stinging her eyes. They processed her with a lazy efficiency, fingerprints smudging ink across her hands. The cameras flash a cold snap in her face. The holding cell was the same, rusted bench and flickering bulb, but now it felt tighter, the walls pressing in. She sat, her back rigid, her thoughts a storm. How many times could they pull this? How deep did Hargrove's reach go? She'd beaten the last frame up in hours. Marcus would come through again. She just had to wait, stay sharp, let the DOJ unravel this mess. Her time stretched, the bulbs buzz a relentless drone. Her stomach growled, her throat parched, but she ignored it, focusing on the plan. Hargrove wanted her broken, scared, out of the fight. He didn't know her. She'd grown up dodging fists and dodging worse, her skin a target since she could walk. This was bigger than her now. A war against a system that chewed up people like her and spat out lies. She'd expose him, rip his empire apart. The thought fueled her, kept her steady. Then the door clanked, and Marcus appeared, his face etched with grim relief. "You're out," he said, tossing her a water bottle. "Warrants a fake, signed with Hargrove's code. We've got the paper trail." She caught the bottle, twisting the cap with a crack, the water cold against her dry lips. "Took you long enough," she muttered, but her lips twitched with a faint smirk. She followed him out, the cops' glares hotter this time, their whispers, a low growl. The forged warrant was a win, another crack in Hargrove's armor. She'd survived his second swing, and it felt good. They stepped into the night, the air thick with humidity, the city's hum a restless undertone. Marcus led her to his unmarked sedan, its engine purring softly. "Get some rest," he said, sliding behind the wheel. "We'll hit back tomorrow." She nodded, climbing in, the leather seat cool against her aching back. The drive was quiet, Cresthaven's neon signs blurring past, a kaleidoscope of decay and defiance. She let her guard drop, just for a moment, the adrenaline fading into a dull ache. She'd won again. Hargrove's goons were sloppy, his plans brittle. She could taste the endgame, feel the weight of justice tilting her way. But as they pulled onto Sycamore, a news chopper roared overhead, its spotlight slicing through the dark. Marcus cursed, slamming the brakes as a van screeched up, blocking the road. Reporters spilled out, cameras rolling, mics thrusting toward the car. "Aisha Coleman, drug bust gone wrong?" one shouted, his voice shrill. Marcus shoved the door open, barking at them to back off, but Aisha's eyes locked on the van's TV screen. There she was, bodycam footage playing in grainy loops, her swinging at cops, a baggie in her hand, her face twisted in a snarl. It was fake, a masterpiece of editing, but the timestamp matched tonight's arrest. Her breath caught, her victory souring in her throat. The chopper's light pinned her, the reporter's questions a deafening swarm. "Is this who the DOJ trusts?" "Another thug in a suit." The slurs weren't subtle, the racism a blunt hammer. She stepped out, her chin high, but the crowd's jeers hit harder than the mob's bottles. Marcus pulled her back, his voice tight. "Hargrove leaked it. We'll fix this." But the damage was done. The city saw her as a monster now, not a hero. Her apartment loomed behind her, a wrecked shell, and she realized Hargrove hadn't just struck back. He'd turned Cresthaven into a weapon against her. What do you think? Should Aisha have seen this coming, or is Hargrove too slick for anyone to predict? Drop a number 1 in the comments if you think she's still got the upper hand. Or a number 2 if Hargrove's playing a game she can't win. If you're rooting for her to tear this corrupt system down, smash that like button. And subscribe for the next twist. We're just getting started. So how far will Hargrove go to bury her? And what's his next move when the city's already turned its back? Aisha Coleman stood frozen under the news chopper's blinding spotlight, the roar of its blades slicing through the humid Cresthaven night. The reporters swarmed like hornets, their cameras flashing, their voices a chaotic tangle of accusations. "Drug dealer or DOJ fraud?" one yelled, his mic jabbing toward her face. Marcus Tate shoved her back into the sedan, his jaw tight, but the damage was already done. That doctored bodycam footage looped on the van's screen, her image warped into a snarling caricature, a baggie clutched in her hand. It was a lie, a vicious stitch-up from Hargrove, but it stuck like tar. She slid into the passenger seat, her chest heaving, her dark eyes burning with a fury she couldn't voice. The city had turned on her in hours, her second escape from Hargrove's. Frame up now, a noose tightening around her neck. Marcus floored the gas, weaving through the clog of news vans, the chopper's light chasing them down Sycamore Street. "They'll eat this up," he muttered, his knuckles white on the wheel. Hargrove's got the press in his pocket. Aisha didn't respond, her mind racing, her fingers digging into the armrest. Her apartment was a wreck, her name trashed, and now Cresthaven saw her as a thug, not a fighter. She'd beaten the fake warrant, walked out of that cell, but Hargrove had flipped the script faster than she could blink. The sedan screeched toward a DOJ safe house on the city's edge, a squat grey building tucked behind a rusted chain link fence. It wasn't home, but it was safe, or so she thought. They pulled into the gravel lot, the chopper fading into the distance, its spotlight swallowed by the night. Marcus led her inside, the safe house stark and sterile, concrete floors, a cot, a single bulb dangling from the ceiling. "Stay here," he said, checking his phone. "We'll counter this tomorrow, get some sleep." She nodded, but sleep was a distant dream. The door clicked shut behind him, and she sank onto the cot, her torn blazer slipping off her shoulders. Her hands trembled, not from fear but from rage. She'd survived the mob, the arrests, and now this. She'd expose Hargrove's lies, turn the tide. She had to. The quiet didn't last. A low rumble grew outside, tires crunching gravel, voices rising into a chant. Aisha bolted upright, her pulse spiking, her boots hitting the floor. She peered through the slatted blinds, her breath catching. A crowd had gathered, maybe 100, strong, spilling across the lot. They weren't cops this time, but civilians, men in trucker hats, women clutching purses, kids hoisted on shoulders. Their faces glowed orange under flickering torches, their signs jagged with hate. "Coleman out," one read. "No thugs in Cresthaven," another screamed. Her stomach twisted, the words a punch to her gut. Hargrove's smear campaign had ignited this, turned neighbors into a lynch mob. A rock smashed through the window, glass exploding across the room, shards slicing her cheek. She ducked, blood trickling warm down her face, her knife already in hand. "Get out, you filth!" a voice bellowed, thick with venom. Another rock flew, then a brick, the cot splintering as it crashed against the wall. She crouched low, her mind racing. How had they found her? Hargrove. He'd leaked the safe house, fed them her location like chum to sharks. The chants grew louder, slurs cutting through the night. "Go back to the gutter!" "Cresthaven's for us, not you." Each one hit harder, stripping her down to her skin, her race a brand they'd never let her shed. She scanned the room, her breath shallow, her options shrinking. The front door was a death trap, the crowd thickening there, their torches casting wild shadows. She edged to the back, spotting a small window above a rusted sink. It was tight, but she could make it. Footsteps thudded outside, closer now, the mob circling like wolves. She grabbed a chair, smashed the window's frame, and hauled herself up, glass scraping her arms as she squeezed through. Her boots hit the dirt outside, the air thick with smoke and rage. She bolted, weaving through a tangle of overgrown bushes, the safe house shrinking behind her as the crowd's roar chased her into the dark. Her lungs burned, her legs pumping, the city's edge blurring past, abandoned lots, skeletal trees, the distant hum of a freight train. She'd escaped, outrun them, her training kicking in when panic should have won. She ducked into a drainage ditch, the damp earth soaking her knees, her chest heaving as she caught her breath. The mob's noise faded, their torches just pinpricks now. She'd won this round, slipped their grasp again. Hargrove's puppets had failed, and she'd lived to fight back. She wiped the blood from her cheek, her resolve hardening. She'd go live, expose that footage as fake, reclaim her name. She pulled the burner phone from her pocket, its screen cracked but glowing. She typed fast, linking to a streaming app Marcus had set up, her fingers steady despite the adrenaline. The signal was weak, but it held. She hit record, her face filling. The frame. The ditch's shadows framing her like a warrior in hiding. "This is Aisha Coleman," she said, her voice low and fierce. "The footage you're seeing, it's a lie. Doctored by Lieutenant Victor Hargrove to frame me, to silence me. I'm DOJ investigating his corruption. Check the timestamps, the edits, truth's coming." She uploaded it, the stream going live to thousands in minutes, comments flooding in. She watched the numbers climb, a flicker of hope sparking. She'd turned it around, taken control. The phone buzzed, Marcus's name flashing. "You're viral," he said, his voice tight. "It's working, people are questioning the footage." She exhaled, a grim smile tugging her lips. She'd done it, clawed back some ground. Hargrove's smear was cracking, the city waking up. She stood, brushing, mud from her pants, ready to move to plan the next strike. But as she stepped from the ditch, a new sound stopped her cold. A car engine, slow and deliberate, rolling closer. She turned, her eyes narrowing. A black cruiser crept into view, its headlights off, its bulk a predator in the dark. Hargrove. He stepped out, his grey eyes glinting in the moonlight, his uniform pristine despite the hour. Two goons flanked him, their faces blank but their hands on holsters. "Nice show," he said, his voice smooth as oil, his smirk a blade. "But you're not the only one with moves." He nodded to one of his men, who pulled out a phone, its screen lighting up with a text. Aisha's gut sank as she read it over his shoulder. "Lena Coleman, terminated from Cresthaven General, family ties to known criminal. Her sister, fired." Hargrove's grin widened. "She's collateral damage. Aisha, back off or it gets worse." Her fists clenched, her nails biting into her palms, the phone trembling in her grip. Lena, a nurse, steady and kind, dragged into this because of her. The live stream had worked, swayed some, but Hargrove had struck deeper, faster, hitting her where it hurt most. "You bastard," she hissed, her voice raw, her control fraying. He shrugged, climbing back into the cruiser. "Your move, Coleman. Choose wisely." The engine roared, and he was gone, leaving her in the ditch, the night, swallowing his taillights. She stood there, the mud cold against her skin, the distant train's wail a mournful echo. She'd escaped the mob, turned the footage against him, but this was a knife to her heart. Lena's job, her life shredded because Aisha wouldn't bend. The crowd's slurs rang in her ears. "Cresthaven's for us, not you." Now, a prophecy Hargrove was fulfilling. She'd won a battle, but he'd escalated the war, turning her sister into a pawn. Her breath hitched, her resolve teetering, then snapping back harder. She'd fix this, get Lena back, bury Hargrove. But as she trudged into the dark, the weight of his next blow loomed heavier than the city itself. Aisha Coleman stood in the damp ditch, the mud soaking through her pants, her burner phone glowing faintly in her trembling hand. Lieutenant Victor Hargrove's parting shot echoed in her skull. Lena, her sister, fired from Cresthaven General, her life upended because of Aisha's fight. The black cruiser's taillights had vanished into the night, but the weight of his smirk lingered, a venomous promise of more to come. Her chest tightened, her breath ragged, the distant train's wail a hollow soundtrack to her fury. She'd turned the mob's attack into a win with that live stream, clawed back some trust, but Hargrove had struck her core, her family, with a precision that cut deeper than any bottle or brick. She wiped the blood from her cheek, her resolve flickering, then flaring back to life. She'd fix this. She had to. The trek to Cresthaven General took 30 minutes, her boots pounding the cracked pavement, her torn blazer flapping in the humid breeze. The hospital loomed ahead, a squat concrete fortress glowing under sodium lights, its parking lot dotted with weary ambulances. Aisha slipped inside, the antiseptic sting hitting her nose, the murmur of late-night staff a dull hum. She beelined for the admin wing, her mind racing. Lena didn't deserve this. A nurse who'd spent 10 years stitching up Cresthaven's broken, now discarded like trash because of her last name. Aisha's name. She found the HR office, a cramped room with flickering fluorescents and a lone clerk behind a desk, his bald head gleaming as he typed. "Reinstate Lena Coleman," Aisha said, her voice low and firm, her hands planted on the desk. The clerk looked up, his watery eyes narrowing, a faint smirk tugging his lips. "She's gone, ties to a criminal, policy." Aisha leaned closer, her shadow swallowing him. That's a lie, and you know it. I'm DOJ, investigating corruption. Hargrove's behind this. Check the records, the timing. It's illegal termination. The clerk flinched, his fingers hesitating over the keyboard. She pulled out the burner, replaying her live stream, the part where she exposed Hargrove's doctored footage. This is viral. People are watching. Reinstate her, or I dig into you next. He squirmed, sweat beading on his scalp, then typed, furiously. Minutes stretched, the clock ticking past midnight, but finally he nodded. Fine, she's back. Takes effect tomorrow. Aisha exhaled, a knot loosening in her chest. She'd done it, flipped Hargrove's move, got Lena her job back. The clerk printed a reinstatement form, shoving it across the desk with a scowl. She snatched it, her boots echoing as she left, a flicker of triumph warming her veins. She'd won this round, protected her sister. Hargrove couldn't touch her family now. She texted Lena from the parking lot, keeping it short. You're back at work, stay safe. The reply came fast. Thank you, Aish. Love you. She smiled, a rare softness breaking through her steel, and headed to a diner 2 blocks away, a grimy joint with peeling vinyl booths and a jukebox humming in the corner. She slid into a seat, ordered coffee and a burger, her stomach growling after hours of nothing. Lena joined her 20 minutes. Later, her nurse scrubs wrinkled, her braids pulled into a tight bun, her brown eyes shadowed but grateful. They hugged, Lena's grip fierce, her voice a whisper. I knew you'd fix it. They ate in quiet, the diner's buzz a comforting shield, the coffee bitter but grounding. Aisha felt the tension ease, her sister's presence a lifeline in Cresthaven's storm. He won't stop, she warned, her burger half-eaten, her gaze fixed on Lena. Hargrove's after me, and you're in his sights now. Lena nodded, her fork pausing mid-air. I can handle it, you've got enough on your plate. They laughed, a brittle sound, and for a moment it felt normal, a victory worth savoring. Aisha leaned back, her boots tapping the floor, her mind drifting to the next step. She'd expose Hargrove's payroll, hit him where it hurt. She'd won this battle, kept her family whole. But the peace shattered like glass. The diner's door burst open, 3 men storming in, their faces masked, their gloves black and gleaming. Aisha's hand shot to her knife, but they moved faster, one slamming Lena's head against the table, the crack of bone on wood a sickening snap. She screamed, lunging across the booth, but a second thug grabbed her arms, pinning her, his breath hot and sour against her neck. The third pulled a note from his pocket, tossing it onto the spilled coffee. Back off or she's dead. They dragged Lena out, her body limp, her scrubs stained with blood. The diner erupting in chaos as patrons scattered. Aisha broke free, her knife slashing air. But they were gone, a van peeling out of the lot, its tires screeching into the night. She stumbled after them, her boots slipping on gravel, her voice raw as she yelled Lena's name. The note crumpled in her fist, Hargrove's handwriting unmistakable, his threat a blade to her throat. She'd won at the hospital, thought she'd shielded her sister, but he'd struck back harder, snatched Lena right from her grasp. Her chest heaved, her vision blurring with tears she wouldn't let fall. She had to find her, save her. She sprinted to a payphone across the street, her quarters clinking as she dialed Marcus, her words tumbling out. Hargrove's goons took Lena. Diner on 5th tracked the van. He cursed, promising backup, but she couldn't wait. She remembered a warehouse district 10 miles north, a precinct haunt she'd scoped during her sting. Hargrove's type loved their lairs. She hailed a cab, the driver's eyes wide as she barked the address, her knife still in hand. The ride was a blur, Cresthaven's neon fading into industrial rot, the cab jolting over potholes. She paid with crumpled bills, stepping into the shadows of towering silos and rusted cranes, the air thick with oil and decay. The warehouse loomed ahead, a hulking shell of corrugated steel, its windows blacked out, a single light flickering. Inside, she crept closer, her boots silent on the cracked asphalt, her pulse a war drum in her ears. Voices drifted from within, low and guttural, Lena's whimper cutting through the haze. Aisha's jaw tightened, her knife gleaming as she slipped through a side door, the darkness swallowing her. She spotted Lena tied to a chair, her face bruised, her eyes wide with terror. Hargrove stood over her, his uniform crisp, his grey eyes glinting with malice. "Collateral damage," he said, his voice a slow drawl, his hand resting on a pistol. "Your arrogance did this, Coleman." Aisha froze, her breath catching, the racism in his tone a whip across her skin. He didn't see Lena as a person, just a tool to break her, a black woman disposable in his world. Her sister's sobs fueled her, her mind racing for a move. Hargrove turned, his smirk widening as he met her gaze. "Found me, huh?" Too late. His goons flanked him, their fists clenched, the trap snapping shut. She'd walked right into it, her victory at the hospital a lure to this hell. Lena's life hung by a thread, and Hargrove held the scissors, his power a noose around them. Both? Was Aisha too reckless, storming that warehouse alone? Or did she have no choice with Lena's life on the line? Drop a number 1 in the comments if you think she's still got a shot to turn this around. Or a number 2 if Hargrove's trap means she's finally outmatched. If you're gripped by her fight against this racist nightmare, hit that like button and subscribe for the next pulse-pounding drop. How's she going to claw her way out of this one, with Hargrove gloating and Lena bleeding in his grip? Aisha Coleman crouched in the shadows of the warehouse, the rusted steel walls pressing in, the air thick with oil and the copper tang of Lena's blood. Her sister sat tied to a chair 10 yards ahead, her face swollen, her scrubs torn, her whimpers, a knife twisting in Aisha's gut. Lieutenant Victor Hargrove loomed over her, his pistol glinting in the dim flicker of a hanging bulb, his grey eyes locked on Aisha with a predator's glee. "Your arrogance," he'd said, his words dripping with venom, his racism a blade he wielded without shame. 2 goons flanked him, their bulk filling the space, their fists scarred and eager. She'd walked into his trap, her victory at the hospital a baited hook, and now Lena's life dangled by a thread. Aisha gripped her knife, her breath shallow, her mind racing for an edge. The warehouse was a maze of crates and machinery, its shadows her only ally. She'd spotted a rusted tool shelf to her left, a tangle of pipes and wrenches glinting faintly. Her DOJ training kicked in, years of undercover ops flashing through her skull. She couldn't take Hargrove head-on, not with his gun and his muscle, but she could outsmart him. She edged along the wall, her boots silent on the grimy floor, her eyes darting between Lena and the goons. Hargrove paced, his voice a low growl. "You thought you'd win, Coleman? Expose me? You're nothing here." He spat the words, his hatred a wall she'd never breach. Lena's head lolled, her sobs fading, and Aisha's chest tightened. She had to move. Now. She reached the shelf, her fingers closing around a small canister. Its label faded, but the weight promising something volatile. A smoke grenade, maybe, left over from some forgotten bust. She popped the pin, her pulse hammering, and lobbed it toward Hargrove's feet. It hit the ground with a dull clank, then erupted, grey plumes billowing out, swallowing the room in a choking haze. Hargrove cursed, his pistol swinging wild, his goons coughing as they stumbled. Aisha surged forward, her knife slashing the ropes binding Lena, her sister's weight slumping into her arms. "I've got you," she whispered, her voice fierce, her grip steady despite the chaos. The smoke thickened, a grey curtain cloaking their escape. She hauled Lena toward a side exit, her boots slipping on oil-slick concrete, her lungs burning from the fumes. A gunshot cracked, the bullet ricocheting off a crate inches from her head, splinters stinging her neck. Hargrove's voice roared through the haze. "You're dead, Coleman." She ducked, dragging Lena behind a stack of barrels, her sisters breathing shallow but alive. The goons blundered through the smoke, their boots thudding, their fists swinging at ghosts. Aisha spotted a fire axe on the wall, its blade dulled but heavy. She grabbed it, her muscles coiling, and swung as the wiry thug lunged. The flat of the axe caught his jaw, a wet crunch dropping him cold. The second goon charged, a bear of a man with a shaved skull, his fist arcing toward her face. She sidestepped, her knife slashing his arm, blood spraying across the barrels. He howled, staggering back, and she seized the gap, pulling Lena toward the exit. Hargrove fired again, the shot wild, pinging off steel. She kicked the door open, the night air rushing in, cool and sharp against her sweat-soaked skin. She stumbled out, Lena's arm over her shoulder, the warehouse a smoldering beast behind them. Flames licked up from the smoke, the grenades, spark catching on spilled oil, the roar of fire swallowing Hargrove's shouts. They ran, Aisha's legs pumping, her sister's weight slowing her but never stopping. The warehouse district sprawled around them, a graveyard of rust and ruin. The fire's glow painting the sky orange. She found a ditch 50 yards out, tumbling into it, Lena collapsing beside her, her breaths ragged but steadying. Aisha checked her pulse, her fingers trembling, relief flooding her as Lena's eyes fluttered open. "You're okay," she said, her voice breaking, her hand brushing Lena's bruised cheek. They'd made it. She'd stormed Hargrove's lair, snatched her sister from his grip, burned his trap to ash. She'd won this round, turned his ambush into her escape. The fire grew, sirens wailing in the distance, Cresthaven's underbelly waking to the chaos. Aisha pulled Lena close, her mind spinning with the next move. Hargrove was still in there. Maybe hurt, maybe not, but he'd lost this time. She'd call Marcus, get Lena safe, hit back harder. Her chest swelled, a grim pride taking root. She'd outsmarted him, saved her blood. The warehouse blazed, a monument to her defiance, and for a moment she let herself breathe, the adrenaline fading into a dull ache. She'd beaten him. Again. But the night wasn't done with her. A new sound cut through the sirens, a low boom that shook the ground, the air pulsing with heat. She turned, her eyes widening as a fireball erupted miles south, a plume of black smoke clawing into the sky. Her stomach dropped, her victory souring in an instant. That was the DOJ safehouse, the one Marcus had left her at, the one she'd fled from the mob. Hargrove's voice echoed in her skull, his smirk a ghost in the dark. "Back off or it gets worse." He'd bombed it, she realized, her breath hitching, her fists clenching. He'd lost Lena, so he'd hit harder, deeper, a strike she hadn't seen coming. She dialed Marcus, her fingers slick with sweat, the burner trembling against her ear. "Safehouse is gone," she said, her voice raw as he picked up. "Explosion." "Hargrove," he cursed, his words clipped. "2 agents were inside, dead. They're pinning it on you, Aisha. Forged logs, your name on the order." Her blood turned to ice, the phone nearly slipping from her grip. Hargrove hadn't just bombed it, he'd framed her, turned her rescue into a massacre, her triumph into a noose. Lena grabbed her hand, her eyes wide with fear, the fire's glow reflecting in her tears. "What now?" she whispered, her voice small. Aisha stood, pulling Lena up, her jaw tightening as the sirens closed in. The news would spin this. Hargrove's lies already taking root. She could hear it now, the headlines screaming "Black terrorist strikes again," her face plastered across every screen, her race a weapon in his hands. The warehouse burned behind her, a pyre of her fleeting win, but the safehouse's ruin was a bigger beast, a blow that shook her to her core. Hargrove had escalated, turned her sister's rescue into a bloodbath, his racism a fire that consumed everything she'd fought for. She led Lena into the shadows, her boots crunching gravel, her mind a storm of rage and strategy. The cops would hunt her now, the DOJ scrambling, Hargrove gloating from whatever hole he'd crawled to. She'd saved Lena, burned his trap, but he'd hit back with a vengeance that dwarfed her escape. 2 agents dead, her name on the blast. Cresthaven's hatred stoked to a fever pitch. She clenched her knife, her resolve hardening through the despair. She'd find him, end this, but first she had to survive the fallout, dodge the net closing around her. The night stretched ahead, a battlefield of smoke and lies, and Hargrove's next move loomed like a shadow she couldn't outrun. Aisha Coleman stumbled through the shadows of Cresthaven's warehouse district, her sister Lena clinging to her arm, the night alive with sirens and the distant glow of the burning safehouse. The explosion's echo still rattled her bones. Hargrove's latest strike a brutal gut punch. 2 DOJ agents dead, their blood pinned on her with forged logs. Her boots crunched gravel, her breath sharp and ragged, the weight of Lena's trembling frame a tether to reality. She'd rescued her sister from Hargrove's trap, burned his warehouse to cinders, but he'd flipped the board again, turning her triumph into a manhunt. The city's pulse thrummed with hate, her name now a curse on every lip, her face a target in every scope. She gripped her knife, her dark eyes scanning the dark, her mind a war zone of survival and revenge. They ducked into an abandoned rail yard, its skeletal boxcars looming like ghosts under a sliver of moon. Lena's breaths came in gasps, her bruised face pale, her scrubs stained with warehouse grime. "We can't stop," Aisha whispered, her voice low and fierce, pulling Lena behind a rusted engine. Sirens wailed closer, red and blue lights flashing through the gaps in the cars, a net tightening around them. She'd saved Lena, but Hargrove's bomb had made her a fugitive, a black terrorist in Cresthaven's twisted tale. Her burner phone buzzed, Marcus's voice crackling through. "They're hunting you, Aisha. Cops, feds, everyone. Stay off the grid." She nodded to the dark, ending the call, her jaw tight. She'd go underground, fight from the shadows. She led Lena to a derelict shed at the yard's edge, its tin walls sagging, its floor littered with broken glass. Inside, she found a cracked laptop among the junk, its battery flickering but alive. Her DOJ hacking skills kicked in, fingers flying over the keys, her breath steadying as she breached the precinct's servers. She dug through files, her eyes narrowing at the rot. Hargrove's orders to plant drugs, fake warrants, now the safe house blast, all tied to his name. She copied it all, her pulse racing, then routed it to an FBI tip line, her message blunt. "Cresthaven PD corruption. Hargrove's the head. Proof attached." She hit send, the upload bar crawling, her stomach knotted with the stakes. If this worked, she'd clear her name, expose him. The laptop pinged, the upload complete, and she exhaled, a flicker of hope sparking. She'd turned fugitive into fighter, struck back from the dark. Lena squeezed her hand, her voice a whisper. "You did it, Aish. They'll see the truth." Aisha nodded, shutting the laptop, her boots scuffing the floor as she stood. The FBI would move, raid Hargrove's empire, end this nightmare. She'd won this round, flipped his frame up into a weapon. They slipped out, weaving through the rail yard, the sirens fading as they hit Cresthaven's fringes, a warren of sagging tenements and flickering neon. She dodged the hunt, landed a blow. She could breathe just for a moment. Dawn crept over the city, a grey smear against the skyline, and Aisha found a flophouse on Juniper Street, its sign buzzing faintly. She paid cash, the clerk too strung out to care, and got Lena settled on a lumpy mattress, her sister's eyes closing as exhaustion won. Aisha stayed up, perched by the window, her knife in hand, the street below a quiet hum. Hours ticked by, the TV in the corner flickering to life with breaking news. "FBI raids Cresthaven precinct," the anchor said, her voice clipped. "Lieutenants arrested, corruption exposed." Footage rolled, Hargrove's lackeys in cuffs, their faces grim. The precinct swarmed with suits. Aisha's lips twitched, a grim smile breaking through. It had worked. Her leak had hit, cleared her name. She'd beaten him again. The anchor's tone shifted, a photo of Aisha flashing on screen, clean and sharp from her DOJ days. "Aisha Coleman, cleared of safe house bombing. Source of the leak, says FBI." Relief flooded her, sharp and sweet, her shoulders easing for the first time in days. Lena stirred, her eyes blinking open, a weak smile meeting Aisha's. "Told you," she murmured. And they laughed, a brittle sound in the dim room. The city might still hate her, but the feds knew the truth. Hargrove's empire was cracking, his lieutenants down, his grip slipping. She'd turned fugitive into hero, at least for now. She stood, stretching, ready to call Marcus, plan the endgame. But the peace shattered like glass. A sharp crack split the air, the window exploding inward, glass raining across the floor. A bullet tore through her shoulder, blood blooming hot and fast, her body slamming back against the wall. Lena screamed, scrambling off the bed as Aisha dropped, her knife clattering, her vision swimming. Footsteps pounded outside, a shadow darting past the blinds, a hitman lean and silent, his rifle glinting in the dawn. She clutched her arm, pain searing, her mind racing. Hargrove. He'd dodged the raid, sent a killer instead, his reach deeper than the FBI's net. She crawled to Lena, her blood slicking the floor, her voice a hiss. "Hide. Now." Lena ducked. Behind the bed, her sobs muffled, as Aisha grabbed the knife, her good arm shaking. The door burst open. the hitman stepping in, his face masked, his eyes cold behind the scope. She lunged, her blade slashing his leg, a grunt escaping him as he stumbled. She tackled him, her shoulders screaming, their bodies crashing into the TV static crackling as it hit the ground. He swung the rifle, the butt catching her jaw, stars bursting in her skull, but she held on, her knife finding his side. Blood spilling warm over her hand. They grappled, a brutal dance of grunts and blows, the room a chaos of splintered wood and shattered glass. She drove her knee into his gut, his grip loosening, and yanked the rifle free, slamming it against his skull. He crumpled, his mask slipping, revealing a scarred face she didn't know. Hargrove's hired gun, not precinct, a ghost from his shadow network. She staggered back, her shoulder throbbing, her breath ragged, Lena rushing to her side. "You're hit," her sister cried, tearing a strip from her scrubs to bind the wound. Aisha winced, the fabric soaking red, but she'd won. The hitman was down, her life intact. Sirens wailed again, closer now, the flophouse trembling as cop cars screeched up. She'd cleared her name, exposed Hargrove's rot, but he'd struck back harder, a bullet through her flesh, a message in blood. The TV flickered, the anchor's voice cutting through. Cresthaven cheers Coleman's downfall, calls her a menace despite FBI findings. The racism stung, a city blind to truth, swallowing Hargrove's lies whole. She leaned on Lena, her vision fading, her resolve stealing through the pain. He'd missed her heart, but he'd hit her world and the fight was far from over. Did Aisha push too hard going underground, or was it her only shot to survive Hargrove's wrath? Drop a number 1 in the comments if you think she's still got the grit to take him down, or a number 2 if this bullet's the crack that breaks her. If you're hooked on her battle against this racist hellhole, smash that like button and subscribe for the next brutal twist. What's Hargrove cooking? Up now with his empire raided and Aisha bleeding but unbowed. Aisha Coleman slumped against the flophouse wall, her shoulder a throbbing mess of blood and torn flesh. The hitman's crumpled body sprawled at her feet. The TV flickered in the wreckage, its static hiss a cruel echo of Cresthaven's cheers for her downfall. Lena knelt beside her, her hands shaking as she pressed a soaked strip of scrubs against the wound, her brown eyes wide with panic. The sirens screamed closer, red and blue lights pulsing through the shattered blinds, the city's hunt closing in. Aisha's jaw ached from the rifle's blow, her vision swimming, but she'd beaten the killer, kept Lena safe. She'd hacked. The precinct, sparked the FBI raid, cleared her name. Hargrove's bullet had grazed her, not broken her. She gripped her knife, her breath ragged, her resolve afire in her chest. The door hung off its hinges, the hitman's blood pooling on the warped floorboards. Aisha pushed herself up, pain lancing through her arm, her boots slipping in the mess. "We've got to move," she rasped, pulling Lena with her, the sirens now a deafening roar. She stumbled to the window, peering out at the swarm of cop cars, their beams cutting through the dawn. No way out there. She scanned the room, spotting a back stairwell through a cracked bathroom door, its tiles grimy but unguarded. She dragged Lena toward it, her sister's sobs a quiet hum, the weight of survival pressing them forward. They slipped down the stairs, the flophouse trembling as boots pounded above, cops storming the room she'd left behind. The alley outside was a narrow slit of shadow, reeking of piss and rotting trash, but it was freedom. Aisha leaned on Lena, her good arm clutching her sister's shoulder, her knife still in hand. They staggered through the maze of Cresthaven's fringes, the city waking to a grey morning, its streets a tangle of honking horns and bleary-eyed workers. Her shoulder burned, blood seeping through Lena's makeshift bandage, but she pushed on, her mind racing. Hargrove had dodged the FBI, sent a hitman, turned her victory into a death sentence. She needed help, a lifeline. She remembered Jamal, a rogue EMT she'd met during her DOJ sting, a black man who'd patched up informants off the books. He owed her a favor. They reached a payphone 3 blocks out, its plastic cracked, its dial sticky with grime. Aisha fed it quarters, her fingers slick, and dialed Jamal's burner, her voice a low growl. "It's Coleman, shot, need you now, corner of Juniper and 9th. He didn't hesitate. his gravelly tone cutting through. 10 minutes. She hung up, slumping against the booth, Lena's hand steadying her. The weight stretched, every passing car a threat, every glance from a stranger a blade. Her blood dripped onto the pavement, a crimson trail she couldn't hide, but Jamal's van screeched up, its paint chipped, its engine rattling. He jumped out, a wiry man with a shaved head and a medkit slung over his shoulder, his eyes sharp with concern. "Damn, Aisha, you're a mess." He hustled them into the van, the back a clutter of bandages and monitors, the air sharp with antiseptic. Aisha lay on a stretcher, her teeth gritted as Jamal cut away her sleeve, his hands quick and steady. "Through and through," he muttered, probing the wound, blood welling under his gloves. "You're lucky. No artery." He stitched her. Up, the needles bite a dull ache against the fire in her shoulder. Lena hovering with a water bottle, she forced Aisha to sip. The van rocked as he worked, Cresthaven blurring past the tinted windows, the sirens a distant wail. "Hargroves, got the city on a leash," Jamal said, taping gauze over the stitches. "They're calling you a cop killer now." Aisha's jaw tightened, the racism a weight she couldn't shake. Her survival twisted into another lie. She sat up, her arms stiff but functional, the pain a dull roar she could ignore. "I need airtime," she said, her voice steady, her eyes locking on Jamal's. "He's framing me for the safe house. I've got to fight back." He nodded, pulling a laptop from his kit, its screen scratched but glowing. She logged into the DOJ stream, her fingers trembling as she hit record, her face filling the frame, blood-streaked and unbowed. "This is Aisha Coleman," she said, her tone cutting through the van's hum. "Hargrove's hitman shot me. The safe house bombing? His work, not mine. FBI's got his lieutenants, but he's loose, killing to silence me. Check the precinct logs I leaked. Truth's there." She uploaded it, the stream live in seconds, her breath hitching as views spiked. The van rolled to a stop in a derelict lot, its edges overgrown with weeds, the city's hum a faint pulse. Jamal watched the laptop, his eyebrows rising. "It's blowing up, Aisha. Thousands watching." She exhaled, a flicker of triumph cutting through the pain. Her shoulder throbbed, but her words were out. The hitman's attack a weapon turned against Hargrove. The stream looped, comments flooding. "She's alive! Hargrove's done!" She'd survived, flipped his strike into proof of his guilt. Lena squeezed her hand, her voice soft. "You're unstoppable." Aisha smirked, the gauze tight against her skin, her resolve hardening. She'd won this round, turned blood into a battle cry. Minutes later, Marcus called, his voice crackling through the burner. "FBI nabbed the hitman. Your stream ID'd him. Links to Hargrove's payroll." Relief hit her, sharp and clean, her shoulder easing as she leaned back. The killer was down, her survival broadcast. Hargrove's web unraveling. She'd clawed back ground, turned fugitive into warrior again. Jamal grinned, slapping the stretcher. "You're a ghost they can't catch." She nodded, her mind already plotting. Hit Hargrove's finances, expose his backers, end this. The van's engine purred, ready to move, her victory a fragile shield in Cresthaven's storm. But the storm broke faster than she'd braced for. A newscast blared from Jamal's radio, the anchor's voice a venomous spike. "Breaking. Coleman's. Childhood home torched. Elderly neighbor dead. Arson tied to her vendetta." Aisha's breath stopped, her hand clutching the stretcher, the gauze tearing under her grip. Her home, a shotgun shack on Elm Street where she'd grown up dodging. Fists and dreaming big, gone. Miss Ellie, the old woman who'd baked her cornbread and patched her scraped knees, dead. Hargrove's voice ghosted in her skull, his smirk a blade. "Back off, or it gets worse." He'd burned her past, killed an innocent, framed it as her. Revenge. She punched the van's wall, pain flaring through her knuckles, her shoulder screaming as blood seeped anew. Lena grabbed her, tears streaking her face, but Aisha's eyes burned dry, her fury a furnace. The radio kept spitting poison. "Ghetto menace strikes again," the anchor sneered, the racism a noose tightening around her soul. Miss Ellie's death wasn't just collateral. It was a message, Hargrove's hand choking her history, her humanity. She'd survived his bullet, turned it against him, but he'd hit deeper, torched her roots, left her bleeding in ways stitches couldn't fix. Jamal killed the radio, his voice low. He's a monster, Aisha, what now? She stood, her boots steady despite the pain, her knife gleaming as she sheathed it. We find him, she said, her tone ice, her gaze steel. He's not done, and neither am I. The van rolled out. Cresthaven's sprawl a battlefield ahead, the arson a wound she'd carry into war. She'd broadcast her survival, caught his hitman, but Hargrove had escalated, turned her win into ash and blood. The city saw her as a plague, her neighbors. Death a lie they'd swallow whole. And his next blow loomed, a shadow she'd face with nothing left to lose. Aisha Coleman sat rigid in Jamal's van, her shoulder a pulsing ache under fresh gauze, her fists clenched as the radio's venomous words burned in her skull. Her childhood home torched, Miss Ellie dead, all pinned on her vendetta. The E. City's hate roared louder, a chorus of ghetto menace swallowing her broadcasted survival. Hargrove's latest strike a wound deeper than the bullet she'd taken. Lena huddled beside her, her tear-streaked face pale, her hands trembling as she gripped Aisha's arm. The van rolled through Cresthaven's fringes, its engine a low growl, the morning grey and heavy with smog. Aisha's knife rested on her, thigh its blade catching the dim light. Her resolve a steel thread through the grief tearing her apart. She'd survived, exposed the hitman, but Hargrove had burned her past to ash and she'd make him pay. They pulled into a derelict gas station, its pumps rusted, its windows boarded, a perfect hideout off the grid. Jamal killed the engine, his sharp eyes scanning the lot, his voice low. You're a ghost now, Aisha. Cops'll swarm Elm Street, what's the play? She exhaled, her breath shaky, her mind racing. She needed leverage, a way to hit back harder than Hargrove's fire. She remembered Darnell, a whistleblower cop. She'd met during her DOJ sting, a wiry man with a limp and a conscience that wouldn't quit. He'd slipped her precinct dirt before, risked his badge. If anyone could nail Hargrove, it was him. She dialed his burner, her voice clipped. Darnell, it's Coleman. Elm Street's gone, need you, gas station on Pike. He grunted assent, the line dead in seconds. Darnell rolled up 20 minutes later, his beat-up hatchback rattling, his face etched with exhaustion under a faded cap. He limped over, his left leg dragging, his dark eyes meeting Aisha's with a flicker of grim respect. Heard about your place, he said, his voice rough. Hargrove's a plague, I've got something. He pulled a USB from his pocket, its casing scratched, and handed it over. Arson orders. His voice, his plan. Recorded it last week, didn't know he'd use it on you. Aisha plugged it into Jamal's laptop, her pulse spiking as Hargrove's drawl filled the van. Burn it, Elm Street, make it her fault, make it her. Her stomach churned, Miss Ellie's kind smile flashing in her mind, now ash because of this monster. She stood, her boots scuffing the van's floor, her shoulder throbbing but ignored. We go live, she said, her tone ice, her eyes locked, on Darnell. This ends him. Jamal rigged the stream, the laptop glowing, the gas station's silence a stark contrast to the fire in her chest. She hit record, her bloodied face filling the frame, her voice a blade cutting through the quiet. Aisha Coleman here. Hargrove burned my home, killed my neighbor, framed me. This is his voice, his order. Cresthaven PD's rotten and he's the root. FBI's got his men, now hear this. She played the recording, Hargrove's words a noose tightening around his neck, the stream spiking to thousands in minutes. The van buzzed with tension, Darnell's limp pacing a rhythm, Lena's breath steadying as she watched. The views climbed, comments flooding. He's done. Justice for Elm. Aisha's lips twitched, a grim satisfaction settling in. She'd turned Hargrove's arson into a weapon, exposed him on live TV, her survival a rallying cry. Darnell nodded, his cap shadowing a faint smile. Mayor's watching, he'll have to act. Minutes later, the radio crackled, a newscaster's voice breaking through. Mayor suspends Lieutenant Hargrove pending investigation. Coleman's broadcast cited. Aisha exhaled, her shoulder easing, her victory sharp and real. His badge was stripped, his power cracked, her name rising from the ashes he'd made. She leaned back, the stretcher creaking, her knife sheathed, her mind savoring the win. Darnell's leak had worked, the stream a sledgehammer to Hargrove's empire. Lena hugged her voice soft. "You got him, Aish." Jamal grinned, slapping the laptop shut. Hero of Cresthaven, whether they like it or not. The mayor's move was a lifeline, the city's tide shifting, her broadcast a beacon through the lies. She'd rallied a cop, turned grief into power, and for a moment she was untouchable, a warrior they couldn't bury. She closed her eyes, the pain a dull hum, her triumph a shield against the storm. But the storm didn't wait. The gas station's windows shattered, glass exploding inward, a roar of engines swallowing the quiet. A militia stormed in, 6 men in tactical vests, their faces masked, their rifles glinting in the grey light. Hargrove led them, his uniform traded for black fatigues, his grey eyes blazing with fury, his badge gone but his power raw. "Uppity bitch," he snarled, his voice a whip, his pistol aimed at Aisha's chest. "Thought you'd win? You're dead?" The racism dripped from him, a venom that saw her as less than human, a target to erase. His men fanned out, barrels trained, the Vanna cage snapping shut. Aisha lunged for her knife, her shoulder screaming, but a rifle butt slammed her jaw, dropping her to the floor. Lena screamed, Darnell swinging his cane at a thug, only to take a boot to the chest, his body crumpling. Hargrove grabbed Aisha's hair, yanking her up, his breath hot against her face. "How you burned my career, so I burn you," he hissed, dragging her outside, the militia hauling Lena and Darnell behind. Cameras rolled, a live feed flickering on a thug's phone, Hargrove's voice booming for the world. "This is justice. She's a plague, and I'm the cure." Her broadcast had stripped his badge, but he turned it into this, a public execution to reclaim his throne. She twisted in his grip, her boots scraping gravel, her vision blurring from the blow. The militia pinned Lena and Darnell, their cries, a dagger in her skull, Hargrove's pistol cold against her temple. Her stream had worked, the mayor's suspension a win, but he'd escalated beyond law, beyond reason, his racism a fire that wouldn't die. Her shoulder bled anew, her strength fading, but her eyes burned, searching for a crack, a move. He'd lost his badge, his lieutenant's, but not his hate, and now she was his stage, her life the price of his defiance. The camera's red light blinked, Cresthaven watching, her victory a trap she'd never seen coming. Did Aisha misjudge Hargrove's desperation, or was this militia always his ace in the hole? Drop a number 1 in the comments if you think she can still outsmart this madman, or a number 2 if his firepower's finally cornered her for good. If you're raging at this racist beast's comeback, hit that like button and subscribe for the next explosive drop. What's Hargrove's endgame with this live-streamed nightmare, and can Aisha turn his spotlight into her weapon? Aisha Coleman knelt on the gravel outside the derelict gas station, her jaw throbbing from the rifle butt's blow, her shoulder leaking blood through Jamal's stitches. Lieutenant Victor Hargrove towered over her, his pistol pressed to her temple, its metal cold and unyielding, his grey eyes glinting with a fury that dwarfed the morning's grey haze. His militia surrounded them, 6 men in black vests, their rifles trained, their faces masked but their intent clear, as the camera's red light blinked on a thug's phone. Lena and Darnell were pinned nearby, Lena's sobs cutting through the air. Darnell's cane snapped under a boot, his limp body still. Hargrove's voice boomed for the live feed. "This is justice. She's a plague and I'm the cure." His racism a venomous thread weaving through every word. Aisha's broadcast had stripped his badge, but he'd turned it into this, a public execution, her life his stage. Her boots scraped the dirt, her hands flexing despite the pain, her mind racing for a crack in his trap. She'd rallied Darnell, exposed the arson, swayed the mayor, but Hargrove had escalated beyond law, his militia a fist she couldn't dodge. The camera rolled, Cresthaven watching, her victory flipped into a noose. She caught a glint on the nearest thug's belt, a stun grenade, its pin loose, a sloppy mistake in his haste. Her DOJ training surged, her body moving before her skull caught up. She twisted, her elbow slamming into Hargrove's wrist, the pistol, firing wild, the bullet chewing gravel inches from her head. She lunged, her good hand ripping the grenade free, her teeth pulling the pin as she rolled. The blast erupted, a flash of light and sound swallowing the lot, the militia staggering, their rifles swinging blind. Aisha dove behind a rusted pump, her ears ringing, her shoulder screaming as she yanked a rifle from a dazed thug's grip. She fired low, a burst clipping his leg, his howl lost in the chaos. Hargrove roared, his pistol swinging toward her, but she ducked, the shot pinging. Off steel. She signaled the sky, a sharp whistle cutting through the smoke, a code Marcus knew from their sting days. The DOJ had to be close, tracking her burner, her only lifeline now. She scrambled toward Lena, her sister's wrists still bound, her face streaked with dirt and tears. Gunfire cracked, bullets tearing through the pump, sparks flying as she dragged Lena behind a stack of tires. Darnell groaned, crawling free, his hands clutching a shard of his broken cane, his eyes fierce despite the blood on his lip. Aisha fired back, her stolen rifle steady, a round catching a thug's shoulder, dropping him in a sprawl. The militia tightened, their masks askew, their shouts a jumble of rage and confusion. Hargrove charged, his pistol blazing, his voice a snarl over the feed. "You're nothing, Coleman. Uppity trash." The racism was his fuel, her defiance a spark he'd die to snuff out. She ducked, her clip emptying, the rifle clicking useless in her hands. Then the sky roared, chopper blades slicing the air, DOJ snipers descending in black. Ropes, their rifles glinting as they hit the ground. "Federal agents, drop your weapons." A voice boomed, Marcus's silhouette leading the charge, his wiry frame a beacon through the smoke. Hargrove spun, his pistol swinging toward the team, but a sniper's shot cracked, grazing his arm, his gun clattering to the dirt. Aisha seized the moment, tackling a thug pinning Darnell, her knife slashing his thigh, blood soaking her hand as he collapsed. The militia faltered, their rifles dropping under the sniper's scopes, their masks no shield against the Fed's precision. Marcus reached her, his hand yanking her up, his voice tight. "You're clear. We've got them." The chopper hovered, its spotlight pinning Hargrove, his fatigues torn, his arm bleeding, his militia crumbling around him. Aisha untied Lena, her sister's arms wrapping around her, Darnell staggering to his feet, his cane shard a makeshift crutch. The snipers cuffed the thugs, their grunts muffled as the camera rolled on, capturing Hargrove's fall. Aisha stood, her shoulder afire she ignored, her breath heaving, her victory sharp and bloody. She'd disarmed them, signaled the DOJ, turned his execution into her rescue. The feed cut, the red light dying, Cresthaven's eyes shut to his defeat. She leaned on Marcus, her boots steady despite the pain, her knife sheathed as the snipers hauled Hargrove's men away. Lena clung to her, Darnell nodding with a grim smile, the gas station a battlefield of smoke and shattered glass. She'd won this round, crushed the militia, escaped the noose. Hargrove knelt, his hands cuffed, his glare a promise of more, but she'd broken his grip, her survival a slap to his face. The chopper lifted, its roar fading, the DOJ's net tightening around his empire. She'd live, fight another day, her family intact, her resolve a steel wall against his hate. But the calm shattered like brittle ice. A new explosion rocked the city, miles east, a thunderous boom shaking the ground, black smoke clawing into the sky. Aisha's stomach dropped, her eyes narrowing as the radio in Marcus's hand crackled to life. "Black church bombed on Oak Street," the dispatcher's voice trembled. "Dozens dead. Suspect, Aisha Coleman's vendetta." Her blood turned, cold, her victory souring in an instant. Hargrove's lips curled, a smirk breaking through his pain, his voice a low hiss. "You think you've won? That's my cleansing, Coleman. Your kind's out of Cresthaven now." The racism was a bomb itself, his hate a fire that consumed innocence. Her rescue flipped into a massacre. She staggered, her shoulder bleeding anew, Lena's grip tightening, Darnell's face paling as the sirens wailed again. Marcus cursed, his phone buzzing with DOJ panic, the city's chaos spilling over. The church, a sanctuary she'd known as a kid, its pews filled with faces like Miss Ellie's, now ash and blood because of her fight. Hargrove had lost his militia, his badge, but he'd struck deeper, bombed a community to frame her. his vendetta a plague she couldn't outrun. The snipers shoved him into a van, his smirk a ghost in her skull. The explosions echo a weight crushing her win. She stood, her boots rooted to the gravel, her knife heavy in its sheath, her mind a storm of grief and rage. The church's loss wasn't just deaths. It was her soul, her people torched to spite her. Hargrove's words, "your kind," rang like a death knell, his racism a weapon that didn't need a gun. She'd escaped his grip, saved Lena, crushed his squad, but he'd turned her triumph into a race riot spark, dozens dead in his wake. Marcus grabbed her arm, his voice urgent. "We've got to move. This is war now." She nodded, her jaw tight, her resolve hardening through the despair. He'd bombed her world, but she'd bury him no matter the cost. Aisha Coleman stood on the gravel outside the gas station, her shoulder a throbbing knot of blood and pain, her boots rooted as the echo of the Oak Street church bombing rumbled through Cresthaven. The black smoke clawed the sky, a wound miles east, dozens dead in a sanctuary she'd once called home. Lieutenant Victor Hargrove knelt in cuffs, his smirk a blade despite the DOJ snipers hauling him to a van. His words, "Your kind's out of Cresthaven now," a venomous taunt that burned her soul. Lena clung to her, her sobs a quiet storm. Darnell leaning on a shard of his broken cane, his face ashen. Marcus Tate gripped her arm, his voice a low growl. This is war now. She'd escaped his militia, saved her family, but Hargrove had bombed a church, framed her, turned her victory into a racial inferno. Her knife hung heavy, her resolve afire through the grief. The DOJ van peeled out, Hargrove's silhouette, fading, but the city erupted around them. Sirens wailed, a cacophony of panic and rage, the morning air thick with smoke and the distant roar of a mob. Marcus pulled her toward his sedan, Lena and Darnell stumbling behind. The gas station a shattered, relic in their wake. "Oak Street's a war zone," he said, his phone buzzing with frantic DOJ chatter. "Riots breaking out, they're blaming you." Aisha slid into the passenger seat, her blood streaking the leather, her jaw tight. Hargrove's bomb wasn't just murder. It was a spark, his racism a match to Cresthaven's tinderbox, her name the fuel. She'd won the standoff, but he'd turned it into this, a city tearing itself apart. The sedan roared through Cresthaven's streets, its tires chewing asphalt, the skyline a blur of grey and fire. Looters smashed windows, their shouts a guttural howl, glass crunching underfoot as they hauled TVs and liquor from storefronts. Crowds clashed, fists and bottles flying, white and black faces twisted in hate, the church's ruin a rallying cry. Aisha's stomach churned, her eyes locked on. The chaos, the racism Hargrove stoked, now a beast she couldn't cage. "They think I did it," she muttered, her voice raw, her hand clutching her knife. Marcus nodded, his knuckles white on the wheel. "He's framed you tight. We've got to stop this." They hit Oak Street, the sedan jolting to a stop, the church a smoldering skeleton ahead. Its steeple lay splintered, its stained glass melted into the pavement, the air thick with ash and the wail of mourners. Aisha stepped out, her boots crunching debris, her shoulder screaming as she moved. Bodies lay under sheets, their edges stained red, survivors clutching each other, their cries a dagger in her chest. She'd sat in those pews as a girl, sung hymns with Miss Ellie, found peace in a city that offered none. Now it was gone. Hargrove's bomb, a wound she'd carry forever, his lie pinning it on her. Lena grabbed her hand, her voice breaking. "This isn't you, Aish." The mob surged closer, 100 strong, their faces flushed with rage, their signs jagged with hate. Coleman's revenge. No more. A brick flew, smashing the sedan's windshield, glass raining as Marcus ducked. Aisha spun, her knife out, her eyes scanning the crowd. They weren't grieving, they were hunting, Hargrove's frame up a gospel they'd swallowed whole. "Murderer!" a man bellowed, his beard flecked with spit, his fist clutching a torch. "You torched our city!" The racism wasn't subtle, her blackness a crime they'd never forgive, her fight a spark they'd die to snuff. She backed up, shielding Lena, Darnell hobbling beside her, his cane shard glinting. She needed to end this, turn the riot into a weapon against Hargrove. She spotted a news van, its camera rolling, its reporter a pale blur shouting into a mic. Aisha bolted, her boots pounding ash, her shoulder bleeding anew as she shoved through the mob. Rocks grazed her, fists swung, but she reached the van, yanking the mic from the reporter's grip. "This is Aisha Coleman," she said, her voice a thunderclap over the feed, her face filling the lens. "Hargrove bombed this church, not me. I've got proof, his voice, his orders. I leaked it. He's the killer, not me. Stop this, see the truth." She held the mic, her breath heaving, the crowd pausing, their shouts faltering as her words hit. The feed went live, her plea viral in seconds. The reporter scrambling to reclaim the mic, but failing. Aisha stepped back, her eyes locked on the mob, their torches dipping, their faces shifting from rage to doubt. Views spiked, thousands watching. Comments flooding. "She's right. Hargrove's the devil." She'd quelled the riot, turned chaos into a cry, her survival a beacon through the lies. Marcus reached her, his hand on her shoulder, his voice low. "It's working, DOJ's moving on him." Darnell nodded, his limp steadying, Lena's tears drying as hope flickered. The mob dispersed, their fire fading, her broadcast a shield against Hargrove's spark. The news anchor cut in, her tone sharp. "DOJ issues arrest warrant for Victor Hargrove. Church bombing linked to his command." Aisha exhaled, her shoulders slumping, her victory sharp and real. She'd stopped the riot, exposed his bomb plot, turned Cresthaven's hate into a noose around his neck. The warrant was out. His empire, crumbling, her name rising from the ashes he'd made. She leaned on Marcus, her boots steady despite the pain, her knife sheathed as the crowd thinned. She'd won this round, flipped his massacre into her triumph, her family safe, her resolve a wall against his hate. But the win didn't last. A screech of tires split the air, a convoy of black SUVs roaring up, their windows tinted, their engines a growl. Aisha tensed, her hand on her knife, Marcus drawing his sidearm as the vehicles boxed them in. Hargrove stepped out uncuffed, his fatigues pristine, his grey eyes blazing with a fury that chilled her blood. "You think a warrant stops me?" he snarled, his voice a whip, his militia flanking him, rifles gleaming. He'd escaped the DOJ, his power deeper than their net, his racism a fire that wouldn't die. "Driver's mine," he said, nodding to a thug who dragged Marcus's limp body from the sedan. A bullet through his skull, blood pooling on the asphalt. Aisha's breath stopped, her world tilting, Marcus's death a hammer to her chest. Hargrove grabbed her, his grip iron, his pistol jabbing her ribs as he hauled her toward an SUV. "You're coming with me," he hissed, his breath hot against her ear. "Testify or die," Lena screamed, Darnell lunging with his cane shard only to take a rifle butt to the jaw, collapsing in a heap. The militia swarmed, their boots stomping gravel, their rifles pinning her family as Hargrove shoved her into the vehicle. The door slammed, the engine roared, and they peeled out, Oak Street shrinking, the church's ruin a ghost in her skull. She twisted in the back seat, her shoulder bleeding, her knife lost in the scuffle, Hargrove's pistol steady in his lap. "You bombed them," she spat, her voice raw, her eyes burning. "Dozens dead, and for what?" He smirked, his tone ice. "To erase your stain, Coleman, Cresthaven's mine." The racism was his creed, her fight a sin he'd killed to cleanse, Marcus's blood a warning she couldn't unsee. She'd quelled the riot, won the warrant, but he'd struck back harder, killed her handler, dragged her to a fate she couldn't name. The SUV jolted over potholes, the city a blur, his kill site ahead, her victory, a memory he'd bury with her. Aisha Coleman jolted against the SUV's backseat, her shoulder a searing mess of blood and torn stitches, her wrists raw from struggling against Hargrove's grip. Lieutenant Victor Hargrove sat beside her, his pistol steady in his lap, his grey eyes glinting with a cold fury that dwarfed the city's chaos outside. The vehicle roared through Cresthaven's industrial sprawl, its tinted windows blurring the world into streaks of grey and rust, Marcus's death a fresh wound in her chest. He'd killed her handler, ambushed her after the riot, turned her, broadcasted triumph into a kidnapping, his racism a fire that burned hotter with every loss. Lena and Darnell were back on Oak Street, beaten but alive, while she was here, barreling toward a kill site, her knife lost, her body battered. She clenched her fists, her resolve a steel thread through the pain. The SUV screeched into a derelict factory, its steel skeleton looming under a sky choked with smog, its windows shattered, its walls streaked with grime. Hargrove shoved her. "Out!" His pistol jabbing her ribs, his militia gone, replaced by a lone thug trailing behind, a hulking figure with a scarred neck and a rifle slung loose. "Move!" Hargrove barked, his voice a whip, his fatigues crisp despite the blood on his arm from the DOJ sniper's graze. Aisha stumbled onto the cracked concrete, her boots scuffing rust, the air thick with oil and decay. He marched her. Inside, the factory a cavern of shadows and jagged machinery. Its floor littered with pipes and broken glass, a tomb he'd chosen for her end. Her eyes darted, scanning for a weapon, her DOJ training a pulse in her skull. She'd quelled the riot, won the warrant, but Hargrove had flipped it, killed Marcus, dragged her here to die. He pushed her toward a rusted conveyor, its belt sagging, its edges sharp with neglect. "You've lost," he said, his tone ice, his pistol steady. "Cresthaven's mine. Your meddling ends here." The racism wasn't veiled, her blackness a stain he'd erase, her fight a rebellion he'd crush. She spotted a steel pipe, 3 feet long, its end dented but solid, half buried, under a pile of scrap. Her shoulder screamed, but she'd use it, turn his trap into her stand. He turned to the thug, barking orders, his pistol dipping for a split second. Aisha lunged, her good hand closing around the pipe, her body pivoting as she swung. The metal caught Hargrove's arm, a sickening crack splitting the air, his pistol flying, clattering across the floor. He roared, his face twisting, his free hand clawing for her throat. She ducked, the pipe arcing again, slamming his knee, his leg buckling as he staggered. The thug charged, his rifle rising, but she rolled, glass cutting her palms, the pipe swinging low to crack his shin, dropping him with a howl. She scrambled up, her breath ragged, her shoulder bleeding, her victory a heartbeat away. Hargrove lunged, his broken arm dangling, his good fist swinging wild. She sidestepped, the pipe crashing into his ribs, a grunt escaping him as he hit the conveyor, its frame groaning under his weight. "You're nothing," he spat, blood flecking his lips, his eyes wild with hate. She swung again, the pipe snapping his elbow, a wet snap echoing, his body slumping, his fight fading. The thug crawled, his rifle inches away, but she kicked it free, her boot cracking his jaw, his eyes rolling back as he went limp. She stood over Hargrove, her chest heaving, the pipe slick with sweat, her triumph raw and bloody. She'd beaten. Him turned his kill site into his grave. But the air shifted, a faint whir cutting through the factory's silence. Chopper blades thrummed overhead, DOJ snipers rappelling through a skylight, their black ropes slicing the gloom, their rifles glinting as they landed. "Federal agents!" a voice boomed. Marcus's team, late but here, their scopes locking on Hargrove. A shot cracked, precise and final, punching through his chest, blood blooming across his fatigues as he collapsed, his grey eyes dimming, his smirk gone. Aisha dropped the pipe, her hands trembling, her body swaying as the snipers swarmed, cuffing, the thug securing the scene. She'd fought one and they'd finished it, her testimony safe in their hands. A sniper approached, a tall woman with a buzz cut, her voice steady. "You're clear, Coleman, he's done." Aisha nodded, her shoulder afire she couldn't feel, her boots steady despite the blood pooling at her feet. The factory's shadows swallowed Hargrove's body, his empire shattered, his militia crushed, his bomb plot exposed. She'd snapped his arm, his will, and the DOJ had taken his life, her victory a brutal dance of steel and grit. Lena and Darnell were safe, Marcus avenged, Cresthaven's nightmare ending in this tomb. She leaned against a crate, her breath slowing, her resolve a wall that wouldn't break. She'd won for real this time. But Hargrove's voice cut through her haze, a dying rasp from the floor, his chest heaving, blood gurgling in his throat. "Your DOJ office," he croaked, his lips twisting, "rigged to blow. My last gift, Coleman, for your meddling black soul." Her blood turned to ice, her victory souring, her eyes widening as the snipers froze. He coughed, a wet laugh escaping, his body stilling, his hate a bomb ticking beyond his grave. The sniper woman grabbed, her radio barking orders, the chopper lifting as they hauled Aisha out, her boots dragging, her mind racing. He'd lost, died, but he'd planted one final strike, her win a fuse she couldn't see. They piled into an SUV, the factory shrinking, the city sprawling ahead, its skyline a jagged threat. Aisha clutched her shoulder, her stitches torn, her blood slicking the seat. Hargrove's words a noose around her throat. The DOJ office, her base, her fight's heart, rigged to explode when she returned, a trap she'd never suspected. His racism had fueled it, her survival a sin he'd punish, beyond death, dozens more at risk in his wake. The sniper woman floored the gas, her voice tight. "We'll beat it, hold on." Aisha nodded, her jaw clenched, her resolve hardening through the dread. He died, but his hate hadn't, and she'd face it, stop it, no matter the cost. The SUV jolted over potholes, Crest Haven's streets a blur, the office miles away, its glass tower a ticking bomb in her skull. She'd fought in the factory, snapped his bones, watched him fall, but his last act loomed, a shadow she couldn't outrun. The sniper's radios crackled, DOJ panic a static hum, the city's chaos a backdrop to her race against time. Hargrove's body was cold, his militia gone, but his bomb was alive. Her victory a fragile thread in a war she'd thought she'd won. Her shoulder bled, her strength faded, but she'd end this, bury his hate with her own hands, or die trying. Aisha Coleman gripped the SUV's armrest, her shoulder a throbbing inferno of blood and torn flesh, her breath sharp as the vehicle roared through Crest Haven's streets. The sniper woman floored the gas, her buzz cut glinting under the dashboard. "Lights," her voice a tight wire. "We'll beat it." Hargrove's dying words clawed at Aisha's skull. "Your DOJ office, rigged to blow. My last gift." His body was cold in the factory, his chest pierced by a sniper's bullet. But his hate lived on, a bomb ticking in the glass tower miles ahead. Her boots stuck to the blood-slick floor, Lena and Darnell safe, but Marcus's death a fresh wound. The city's chaos a roar outside. She'd snapped his arm, watched him fall, but this was his endgame, a trap to bury her fight in rubble. Her jaw clenched, her resolve a steel core through the dread. The SUV jolted over cracked asphalt, Crest Haven's skyline looming, the DOJ office a sleek monolith against the smog-choked dawn. Sirens wailed, a symphony of panic. The snipers' radios crackling with urgent chatter. "Evacuate now!" Aisha's good hand clutched her knife, its blade lost in the factory, but its weight a ghost in her grip, her mind racing. Hargrove's racism had fueled this, her survival a sin he'd punish beyond death, dozens of agents at risk in his final strike. The sniper woman swerved past a burning car, looters scattering, the riot's embers still glowing from the church bombing. Aisha's chest tightened, her victory in the factory a fragile thread, his bomb a noose she'd cut or choke on. They screeched into the office lot, the tower's glass shimmering, its lobby a chaos of fleeing suits and flashing lights. Aisha stumbled out, her shoulder bleeding anew, her boot steady despite the pain. The sniper woman barked into her radio, "Bomb squad's 10 out." Too late. Aisha's eyes locked on the building, her gut screaming seconds, not minutes. She'd diffused traps in her DOJ days, crude rigs in backrooms, but this was Hargrove, precise, vicious, a master of ruin. She bolted inside, the sniper yelling, "Coleman, wait!" But she wouldn't, her legs pumping, her breath afire in her lungs. The lobby blurred, agents shoving past, her path clear to the basement stairs, the hum of machinery a clue to his design. She hit the lower level, a cavern of pipes and flickering bulbs, the air thick with dust and the faint tang of chemicals. Her shoulder screamed, blood dripping onto the concrete, but she scanned the shadows, her training a pulse in her skull. A red glow pulsed from a utility closet, its door ajar, wires snaking out like veins. She kicked it open, her vision swimming, the bomb a tangle of circuits and plastique, its timer glaring, 90 seconds. Her stomach dropped, her hands trembling. As she knelt, her good arm probing the mess. Hargrove's voice ghosted in her ears. "For your meddling black soul." His racism a bomb she'd defuse or die under. She traced the wires, Her fingers slick, her breath shallow, the clock ticking. 60 seconds. A blue lead looped to a detonator, a red to a backup, her memory flashing to a training op in Quantico, a rig like this, a trick in the colors. She yanked her sleeve off, wrapping it around her hand, her shoulder a fire she ignored. 40 seconds. She cut the blue, the timer freezing, then buzzing. A false halt. Hargrove's trap within a trap. She cursed, her pulse hammering, and sliced the red, the clock stopping at 3 seconds, the silence a thunderclap in her skull. She'd done it. Diffused it. Her hands shaking, her body slumping against the wall, blood pooling at her knees. The sniper woman burst in, her rifle lowered, her eyes wide, her eyes. "So you're insane, Coleman, it's clear." Aisha nodded, her breath heaving, her victory sharp and real. The bomb was dead, the office safe. Hargrove's last gift snuffed out by her hands. Agents swarmed, their voices a hum, the sniper hauling her up, her shoulder a wreck but her spine unbowed. They climbed to the lobby, the tower intact, Cresthaven's chaos, a distant roar outside. She'd raced the clock, beaten his hate, saved dozens more from his grave. The DOJ buzzed, her name, a whisper on every lip, her triumph a shield against his final strike. They stepped into the lot, the morning sun breaking through smog, the sniper guiding her to a medic van, its doors open, its kit ready. Aisha sat, gauze pressed to her shoulder, her eyes scanning the city, its scars a map of her war. Hargrove's empire was dust. His lieutenants cuffed, his militia crushed, his bomb plots exposed, his body cold. She'd snapped his arm, quelled the riot, diffused his endgame, her fight a flame that wouldn't die. Lena and Darnell were safe, Marcus avenged, the church's dead, a weight she'd carry but not bow to. The medic stitched her up, her pain a dull hum, her resolve a wall that held firm. She'd won truly this time, but the quiet broke. A faint click from the sniper's radio, a voice cutting through. "Coleman, you're live." A speaker in the van crackled, an audio feed playing, its tone chilling her blood. She was the bait, a man said, his cadence clipped, familiar. Director Ellis, her DOJ boss, recorded months ago. "Frame her, flush Hargrove out. Her life's expendable, the case isn't." Aisha froze, her stitches pulling, her breath stopping as the truth hit. Ellis had planted the first arrest, the courtroom sting, sacrificed her to lure Hargrove, his voice calm as he bartered her soul. The sniper woman paled, her radio dropping, the medic's hands pausing mid-stitch. A second voice chimed, Marcus's, alive then. "She's one of us, Ellis, this is too far." Ellis's reply was ice. "She's black, expendable." Hargrove's, the prize. The racism wasn't Hargrove's alone. It was the DOJ's, her allies betting her life, her race a pawn in their game. Aisha's fists clenched, her blood roaring, the medic stepping back as she stood, her shoulder bleeding through the gauze, her eyes a storm. She'd fought, bled, won, but they'd framed her first, her heroism a gambit she'd never signed for. The audio looped, Cresthaven hearing, the DOJ's rot exposed, her victory a lie she'd unravel. She ripped the gauze off, her boots hitting the pavement, the sniper yelling, "Coleman, stop!" But she couldn't, wouldn't, her stride steady, despite the pain. The tower loomed, its glass a mirror to her betrayal. Ellis's office floors above, his voice a ghost she'd silence. She'd saved them, diffused the bomb, but they'd used her. Her blackness a tool, her life a chip they'd tossed. The medic van faded, the lot a blur, her knife's absence a weight she'd replace with truth. She'd quit, walk away, expose. Them next. Her fight shifting from Hargrove's hate to the DOJ's own. She hit the street, Cresthaven's sprawl swallowing her, its chaos a hum she tuned out, her shoulder a fire she bore. The audio played on radios, TVs, phones, the city waking to Ellis's words, her name a rallying cry against a new foe. She'd beaten Hargrove, saved the office, but the twist cut deeper. Her allies, the architects of her hell. Her steps echoed, steady and unyielding, the sun climbing higher, its light harsh on her scars. She'd fought for justice, won it, but it was tainted, a prize she'd reject. The DOJ was next, its rot her target, her war far from over. She vanished into the crowd, her torn blazer flapping, her blood a trail she didn't hide, her resolve a blade sharper than ever. Cresthaven churned, its hate a shadow she'd outlasted, Hargrove's bomb a memory she'd buried. But Ellis's voice lingered, his betrayal a wound she'd carve open, her exit a promise to the dead. Marcus, Miss Ellie, the church's dozens. She'd expose them, burn their lies, her blackness no pawn but a weapon they'd fear. The city stretched ahead, a battlefield anew, her fight reborn, her victory hers alone, unbowed, unbroken, unstoppable. Aisha Coleman's journey through Cresthaven's chaos offers profound lessons about resilience, betrayal, and the fight against systemic racism. Her story teaches us that courage isn't just surviving the mob or defusing a bomb, it's standing tall when the world brands you a villain for your skin. Aisha faced relentless attacks, from Hargrove's racist venom to the DOJ's cold exploitation, yet she turned every blow into a weapon, proving that strength lies in outsmarting, not just outlasting your enemies. Her victories, saving Lena, exposing corruption, quelling riots, show that justice demands action, not surrender, even when the cost is personal, like losing Marcus or her childhood home. The twist of the DOJ's betrayal reveals a darker truth. Allies can wield racism as cruelly as foes. Aisha's fight wasn't just against Hargrove, but a system that saw her as expendable, a lesson in questioning those who claim to stand with you. Her choice to walk away, vowing to expose Ellis, underscores that true power comes from rejecting tainted winds and forging your own path. Racism here wasn't loud slurs alone, it was bombs, frames, and calculated sacrifice, a reminder that it thrives in silence as much as in shouts. Aisha's unbreakable spirit teaches us to keep fighting, even when the battlefield shifts beneath your feet. What's the takeaway? Justice isn't handed out, it's seized, often from those who'd rather bury you than lift you up. So what do you think? Did Aisha's final stand inspire you, or was the DOJ's betrayal the real gut punch? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit like if her grit moved you, subscribe for more raw tales, and share if you believe in exposing truth. Thanks for riding this storm with us. May you find your own strength to face the shadows, wherever they lurk.